Wow, now that was exhilarating. I don't know about you. So we have multiple heads to do on this Spider Gwen, and we're going to dive right into this. But as I mentioned in the text, Funcrecol is the sponsor of today's video. They sent me their resin to use, which, by the way, comes with UV putty included, and they don't advertise that, and I told them they need to, because this UV putty stuff we're going to show you here in a minute is really awesome stuff. This is the big canister that they sent me that you can get, and all of this stuff's available on Amazon. The links are down in the description if you're interested after watching this. This first bit of putty, which again, they come with a small amount in each bottle of resin, is very thick, and then they have this other stuff in a syringe that actually is like toothpaste. Now, on to something totally different, because we have to get this model prepped, and you can see how some models, they just fit together pretty tightly, the keys. And I recently got this Sonic Saber from Frozen, and I absolutely love this thing. It literally cuts like a hot knife through butter on resin, so no more having to like sand this down and make a big old sandy, dirty, dusty mess. You can actually use this Sonic Saber. It basically vibrates the blade at a supersonic speed, and what it does is it allows it to cut through the resin, and it literally works like a hot knife through butter. The shavings that come off are literally hot from the vibration, but it allows you to easily cut and reshape resin. I absolutely love one of these things. Just if you don't have one, they're a little pricey, but it's well worth it in the amount of time it saves, and it saves, I mean, your health too, because you don't have to sit and breathe in all that dust. Just look how easily it cuts these keys down, just shaving them down so I can easily fit them. Again, I will leave a link in the description. You can buy these on Amazon just like I did. Look how much easier these fit together, just in and out, nice and easy. Now, we do have this seam we need to deal with, but obviously, yeah, I at least got it to fit together as closely as possible to get the seam as small as possible before then using this putty. Now, this thicker putty, like I mentioned, works really well, and there's a small amount that comes in every bottle of with every bottle of resin, and I'm really shocked at that. And I told them, I was like, hey, why don't you guys advertise that? Because I've never got a bottle of resin and got some putty in it. So this stuff, they even give you this little metal spatula, which I would prefer more like a silicone one, which again I mentioned to them, but it's still really nice they include it. And you just scrape that into the holes like you would. And then I have this UV flashlight. Again, I bought it on Amazon. Links down in the description. These things are fairly inexpensive, and there's so many different versions of it. You just put that on there for about 10 seconds and cure it out, and then sand it down, because you're still going to have to sand it to make it smooth. This required a little bit of help from the Dremel tool that I have, and eventually then, again, I was able to get it down nice and smooth. And once we had that side done, I wanted to try out the toothpaste on the other side. And I say the toothpaste because this stuff is much thinner, and it comes in a tube, which you literally then squeeze out like a syringe into place. And that's what you see I'm doing here, is I'm squeezing it into that crack. So it's almost like the difference is like, this is like caulking. If you've ever done that before to finish a renovation project or something like that, to seal something up, it's the same consistency as like caulking. So you put that into place, and then same thing, I'm just cleaning it up with a cotton swab here, just trying to smooth it out a little bit to save myself some sanding before I do go ahead and cure it. Same thing, cure it for about 10 to 20 seconds with that flashlight, and it cures rock hard. I've used this on other projects since then because I absolutely love it, and it works so well. And you can see how you get a nice flush result when you're done. Now, we have everything prepped. We can actually start painting now. So first we're going to do the base because we'll start from the bottom up. And I'm starting with a light gray dry brush over top of a gray primer. So I did prime these off before I recorded, and I'm just dry brushing over that gray primer with this light gray dry brush. Then to create that brick look, I'm using this Dark Oath Flesh. And the reason I chose this translucent paint from Citadel, this contrast paint, is because it's not completely opaque. Like, it actually does help to use that dry brush, right? So we dry brushed first to create some contrast, and then we use the contrast paint to take advantage of that. If we just used a regular acrylic paint, we would lose all that. So after I sprayed that coat of the Dark Oath Flesh, I'm using this rust dry brush color over top of the brick. Because if you ever look at brick, especially red brick, it's usually like reds and oranges. It's a little faded. So I just try to add in some of that realistic brick look, which is, again, reds and orange. And rust is a great orange color. And then all I did was take the tape off, and you can actually see that difference there, the concrete top of this wall versus the brick. A very simple base, which, by the way, is a very common thing with Abe 3D's designs. That's why I love them so much, because I love simple bases. Let's focus on the character. Now, we do have the web, which you see I primed in white, and all I'm using is this Holy White contrast speed paint from Army Painter, and it's called Holy White, but it's actually like a light gray. And I'm using that just to create some shadows on the webs, and once the webs are in place, our little base is done. If you're a collector or an artist, check out my website at relentlessstormmodels.com, where you can browse a growing library of over 400 models to choose from. I'd love the opportunity to print and paint a model to add to your collection. Unpainted kits are also available for purchase. For commission requests, send an email to relentlessstorm7@gmail.com, and I'll be happy to work with you. Be sure to use code STORMYT2024 at checkout for 10% off your entire order. I also have listings on eBay and Etsy, but my entire library can only be found on my Shopify site, relentlessstormmodels.com. Now that we have the base out of the way, we can move on to Gwen's outfit. And I'm sticking with that Holy White to start because, again, I primed her entire suit white, and I'm using that Holy White, which is, again, a light gray, to add in some gray shadows to the shadowed parts of the white parts of her suit. So that includes like her hoods and the masked head, because we actually have like 4 different head versions for this thing, including the masked version. And then we're just going to do her curves on her body. Now, part of this is going to be painted in black, but it's a good habit to get into, just paint all those shadows whatever color they're going to be, just so you have nice smooth transitions after you do actually paint in the other part of this suit, which is a black. So with that part done, we do have one little piece of blue on this that we're going to airbrush, and that's her shoe, which I will come back and use dark gray on the suit part of her foot. But in this case, I'm just showing we're going to use this cyan, deep cyan, which is a nice blue color. I use this quite a bit. I used it back on Superman a while ago too. If you haven't seen that, go check it out. And then I'm using this speed paint Tidal Wave, which is a nice dark blue, to add in some shadow. And by the way, if you're curious, the difference between Citadel's contrast paints and Army Painter speed paints through an airbrush, there isn't any. They both work beautifully. So definitely try them out through an airbrush if you've never done that before. So after we have her shoes done, we're going to work on what we can without masking. I really hate masking, and there's a lot of curves on this, so masking is almost just going to be a pain. So I know a way around masking. If you're very good with brush painting, you can make it look like airbrush. If you have the good paints too, like these Atom paints that I'm spraying. In this case, I'm using Dunkelgrau, which is just German for dark gray, and I'm airbrushing over parts and using my hand as a mask to mask off the parts that gotta stay white. And then after I did that, I brushed in by hand all the parts that are gray, or black as we would say, but I'm using dark gray to paint the black. All the areas that need to be black are being painted with the dark gray with my brush. Now, you're probably wondering why I keep using dark gray and saying dark gray for a black part. It's because this is how I paint black. Just painting something black, you can't go any darker. And if you want to add contrast, you have to start with a lighter tone if you're going to use, again, black. So I use dark gray because it's my favorite color to use even from my tank days, and I use this to do black, because now you can see I'm using matte black, or you can use a shader. If you want to use a Citadel black shade, you can, and you just go in all those shadows with the black, and now look how you actually still looks like it's black, but you actually have shades of black instead of just plain old black, which is honestly just pretty boring if there's no highlights and shadows. Because remember, we want to create contrast, because contrast creates depth. We have a miniature model, we need depth. Now on to Onyx Coral. This is one of my favorite pink colors. It's very similar to the vintage pink that you've seen me use in the past from Adam. And Adam and Ionic are very, very similar. Ionic's just a little bit thicker, a little bit more friendly for brush painting, although Adam works just fine as well. Now what you see me doing is I'm painting in the pink parts of her little webs that are on the insides of her arms. They are pink, and then that deep cyan blue that I used earlier on her shoes. And what I'm doing is just filling in the recess parts. So on this model, the pink parts are recessed, the blue are raised. So that's why I did the recessed parts first. And if it looks a little sloppy, it's because it's really hard to get a paintbrush inside an area and not slop it onto the raised area. So you do the recessed area first, the part that's further down, right? And then you do the raised part second with the blue, as you see me using. And this is the same deep cyan I used earlier, which is an Atom paint. And you can see it brushes just fine in this case. And it looks really nice. And that's really as simple as her suit is. Now, the mask is the only one we're going to be doing this pink color on, because everything else is her normal face. So I figured we'll get this one out of the way. I'm using the same coral pink that we used earlier, just on the outer edge of that eye with a very fine brush. Now, the insides of the hoods have that same webbing, and I was honestly dreading this walking into it, but I figured, you know what? It's the inside of the hood. I don't need to do what I did on her arms. I can just airbrush that area pink, and then I'll come back and paint with a brush on the blue. And that's what I did here with this hood. You can kind of see before and after. So airbrush that inside, and then this is how I did it, just with a number 2 brush. Just slowly but surely watched TV while I brushed forever to get this done. But it all worked out. It all looks great. And you can kind of see how they look. Again, there's 2 different hoods. I want to take a moment to say thank you to my patrons that support my work. If you're interested in some exclusive content, including daily vlogs and how-to videos, so you can get better at this hobby, or perhaps you are ready to take the next step and turn your hobby and passion into a side gig and earn some extra cash, head on over to my Patreon, where you can get exclusive access to extra content. Now let's move on to the skin tones, and I'm going to show you that you have to do some pre-shading with skin tones. If you just paint skin tones over top of white or black, you're probably going to get undesirable results. You always want to start with a pink base when you're spraying flesh tones. So I'm using fuchsia to start with here, but you can use any kind of a bright pink color over white, and spray your pink over white. Do not spray it over black, or else again, undesirable results. You see I'm using carmine red in some shadowed areas, and that gives us some nice undertones. Now, this is what I call the trio of flesh tones that I use. Warm skin is our base color, beige pink is our shadow, and light skin is our highlight tone. I'm going to show you exactly how I use this. Start with the warm skin, as I said. We're going to just use this as our base coat. We're just going to spray this over all the areas that we just painted red and pink. And what we're doing is we're giving it a light first coat. We don't want to overcoat this and completely cover up those shadows that we created, the shades that we created before. One light coat will still allow some of that variation to shine through. And then what you do is you take this beige pink from the bottom. Again, so we're basically spraying this from the bottom as if we're spraying on shadows, right? All the shadowed areas that we would see, we're spraying in from the bottom, and we're trying to create a darker skin tone from below. And it's really easy to do. You just do it underneath the chin, around the back of the neck, and around like the eyes and the mouth, because you're adding in where the shadows would fall. And then the last step is to add the light skin highlights, and that's coming in from the top. So that's like the sun's coming down, and where's the light hitting her face, and you can easily just spray that from up above. You see what I'm doing is holding it sideways to spray at an angle so that it only hits from the top. And what that does is creates a really nice light skin effect. Now after we have that done, I'm using the same coral pink, or it might even be the vintage pink from Adam, because they're very, very similar colors. they're not exactly the same, but very similar. I'm painting that on her lips because I figured why not match her lips to the colors on her suit. Then we're going to do all the blacks. After I do the lips, I do all the blacks, which is, in this case, we're going to do her eyebrows, her eyelashes, her eyeliner. We're just going to use a really nice fine brush and fill in all those details. And again, this is something that Abe 3D does a great job with. The eyelashes are always very easy to paint. They're very large, and the eyes are always very large as well. We can get in there. And a lot of Abe 3D's designs, they also add in a place where the iris is, which makes it a lot easier to paint. There's actually like a flat spot, so you don't always have to be perfect in knowing where it should go by eyesight. So after we have all the blacks in there, we're going to paint in the whites. Now I use an off-white. It's ivory is the color that I use, and I really do like that color over just white for the eyes. It's okay if you go out of bounds a little bit with the white. As you can see here, I just filled it back in with the black. After you have the eyes white in, then we're going to put in the iris. Now, sometimes I like to do the black around the irises, but I'm finding I actually just like to do the darker color first. So in this case, her eyes are blue, so I'm just using like a mid-tone blue to fill in her irises. And then what I'm going to do after I have her mid-tones in is I'm going to come back with a lighter shade of blue and fill in just the bottom half, like almost like a U shape. The bottom part of her iris, we're going to do a lighter blue. And if you ever look at a picture of someone's eye catching light, that's typically how it looks. You have a darker part of the eye color on top and the lighter color of the eye color on the bottom. And after I have those two tones in, I'm going to go ahead and add in her pupil on her iris, which is just black. I know, boring, but hey, that's what our irises are. Wait, our pupils? Yeah, the pupils are. They're just a hole, so it's black. And then one little nice touch you got to do, and this was with actual white, like white paint, is just on the side where the light would reflect, you put a little dab of white, and it looks like a reflection in her eye. And the last step to really finish it off is to put in some gloss varnish over the eyes and the lips. And it really, really sets off that face. Really, really makes it beautiful. I absolutely love this little touch. It's a subtle thing, but I'm telling you, it adds so much, and it's so easy to use. And I just use VMS gloss varnish, which is really nice. Now, she does have hair, so we need to make sure we do that as well. Now, I started with the beige pink on her hair, and then I painted with a dry brush technique this faded yellow, and this has become like my new favorite way to do blonde. I'm actually painting magic right now as I'm recording this, and I absolutely love this method for blonde, is to use the beige pink skin tone. You basically use flesh tones and then just use very light yellows as a highlight with a dry brush. And what it does is it doesn't make the hair look so much yellow, it just makes it look lighter yellow, and it's still the flesh tones give it that natural blonde look. And here you can see all the different versions of the heads. There's 3 different haired versions in the mask for a total of 4 heads. And that's how we make her.
With vibrant grace, the masterpiece stands, each detail crafted by skillful hands. A silent tale of colors and form, a testament to art where beauty is born. Prime the base so the paint will hold. Blend your paints with hue so bold. Spray your colors, let contrast unfold. Prepare to bring life your sculpture's story told. Another bit of beautiful creation from relentless storm. Another bit of beautiful creation from relentless storm. From relentless storm. From relentless storm.
Alrighty, folks, I do hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please smash that like button. Also, please, I have plenty more content coming your way, and I hope you come back for more, so please subscribe so you don't miss future videos. And also, don't forget to check out my Patreon and my website if you're interested in painting these for yourself or having me paint one for you.